Hi, welcome back to the Return Homestead. Today I've got 6 pounds of cucumbers that were gifted to me. So I'm going to be making bread and butter pickles. I have plenty of dill pickles. Well, actually, they're spicy zucchini dill pickles, and I've got plenty of those from last year. So now I'm going to make bread and butter pickles. I've got lots of onions. I've got lots of cucumbers taking up room in my refrigerator, so I'm going to use them. Each recipe calls for 2 pounds of cucumbers. I have 6, so I'm making 3 recipes. And I'm going to put them in my food processor. It has a adjustable blade on it, and you want them about 1/4 of an inch thick. Now some of these are going to be too big for the hopper, so I'm going to have to do those by hand. I'm not a big cucumber eater. Once in a while we'll eat a cucumber onion salad, but for me, I can only eat so much of that. It's good, it's just that it's not my thing. Pickles, I can eat a lot of, and I don't need any of the dill pickles or even spicy dill pickles. So this is another way of preserving the gift that God gives, and that came in the form of a neighbor. So I don't let anything go to waste. During the harvest season, I try to process something daily. I try to preserve food daily, whether I'm popping beans and putting those in the freezer or whatever it is. I have to make a lot of salsa. I've got to make some diced tomatoes to cook with because I had to buy them all last year. I didn't have the best harvest. We struggle with blight here really bad because of the high humidity, but we also got it in the desert. So it's not just due to the humidity, and I tend to be a rebel when it comes to gardening. We overcrowd everything. When we put our potatoes in, we thought we would see how they would do by crowding them in pretty tight. We would have gotten a probably bigger potato, but we got some that were about like this, and we ended up with 240 pounds, which will do us all year. Plus I have some blanched and in the freezer. So with tomatoes, they have to have the constant airflow, and if you've watched our tomato video, you'll see that we keep them pruned up pretty good, but we grow indeterminates, meaning they're a vining tomato and they just keep growing. I might try and do some determinants this next harvest or next gardening season, but this year it was all indeterminates. And we're still getting tons of tomatoes. I have a bunch that has to be processed. My freezers are full, so I'm going to have to start processing tomatoes before this winter. So we've been very blessed, and I don't see that as a bad thing. I think it's great. I was also gifted a bunch of bell peppers, and we have a bunch of corbaci peppers. So with my diced tomatoes, I'm going to put peppers in them. I use a lot of diced tomatoes when I make pasta or Western hash, which you should catch that video. It's a good way to feed your family inexpensively. I'm going to be doing a bunch of diced tomatoes too today, if I can get to it. We'll see how that goes. But if you're not a big cucumber fan, and the chickens don't really care for them, the goats don't like them, so I'm going to make use of this bounty and make my sweet pickles. Of course, I'm going to add some pepper powder that I freeze-dried from last year. I've got to put spice in everything, or Mike won't eat them. He doesn't really care for sweet pickles, but he likes them as long as they've got some spice in them. When we were in the desert, I was able to grow a lot of onions. Here I haven't found the secret recipe. So the onions that I'm getting are fairly small. They're extremely flavorful, but they are small. I didn't grow vidalias. I think that they would grow in a hot, humid climate, since that's a Georgia thing. I haven't found that secret recipe. My neighbor did give me some volunteer half-runner beans, and those things have gone nuts, so I'm very grateful for that. I'm used to having to really amend soil to get anything to grow from being in the desert. Here that's not really true. You can pretty much put it in the ground. However, some things that grew really good in the desert, like onions and cilantro and chamomile, I've been struggling with here. So I'm adjusting a little by little. This is only our second gardening year here, so I think we've done very well. If you guys have any tips, let me know. Or know what kind of onion does the best here. I've grown candy onions, sweet Utah, Spanish onions, but they've all been pretty small for me. I've grown German chamomile and rowan, and again, I did get some off of it, but in that I got tons. I had to harvest every morning. So it's a learning curve when you change weather and geography like we did. So those are all going to go into a pan. And since I'm doing 3 recipes, I need a really big pan. So this is my tamale pan. Honestly, I use it more for stuff like this. Okay, those are all in. And now you're going to take 2/3 of a cup of salt, and it needs to be non-iodized per recipe. And you're going to work that in. And what it's going to do is start breaking down these vegetables just a bit. And the liquid will go down to the cucumbers. You're going to cover this with ice cubes, and you're going to let it set an hour and a half, I believe. I'll double check that. Ooh, these onions are strong. Have you ever noticed anything coming out of the garden seems to be way more strong than anything you'd buy at a grocery store? Probably has a lot to do with the fact that it's on the road a few days. Well, make my eyes water. Okay, and now I'm going to cover it with ice cubes. Okay, so this is set for an hour and a half, and it's ready to start rinsing. But before I do that, I need to prepare the liquid that's going to go in the pickles. You will need 2 cups of sugar per recipe, 2 tablespoons of mustard seed, so it's 2 tablespoons of mustard seed per recipe. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 2 teaspoons of turmeric. Be careful, this stuff stains really bad. It's a great dye. 2 teaspoons of celery seed. And this is my freeze-dried jalapenos and Fresnos. And I'm going to add a teaspoon per recipe. And 1 teaspoon of ginger per recipe. And then it will also need 1 teaspoon of peppercorns per recipe. And then it will call for 3 cups of vinegar, and it needs to be 5%. There's one recipe. And make sure that it's 5%. I saw somebody post on Facebook the other day that they're putting vinegar out that's less than 5%. If it's less than 5%, it's not going to store your food well. Now this mixture will go on the stove and you're going to bring it up to a boil. In the meantime, I've got my canner on the stove coming up to heat. So now I have my spice mixture on the stove. And I've thoroughly rinsed my onions and cucumbers. I'm going to add them to the spice mixture and bring it up to a boil. You want to wait until the sugars dissolve before you add the cucumbers. Once that comes up to a boil, then I start packing it in jars. Now, even though all the vegetables that I'm using did not come from my garden, I'm grateful that I have a neighbor who trades me produce for my chicken eggs. So while I'm waiting for this to come up to a boil, I'm going to start preparing the tomatoes that I picked today to go into the freezer. I have a little bit of room left. I've harvested some tomatoes and I'm going to core and score them. What that means is I'm going to take the core out. And then generally I just put an X in the bottom, throw it in a plastic bag, and it goes into the freezer. When I'm ready to start processing salsa and tomatoes and pasta sauce, I will take them out of the freezer and pull the skins, so the skins will slip really easy. Such a pretty tomato. This is a Cherokee Purple, my favorite. And make my salsa and my pasta sauce, and it's ready to go. So I don't have to scald them and then put them in ice water. I skip that step just by doing this. And I don't lose any tomatoes. If you see any bad parts, go ahead and cut those off then too, because you don't want those in there. Once they're frozen, they're a little harder to see. The terracotta tomatoes are a little different looking. I'm used to red tomatoes, but they taste really good. And these are the Jet Star tomatoes. They look like this every tomato, every time. But they're not an heirloom. Heirloom tomatoes are generally not pretty, but the Jet Stars are always consistent. Problem is you can't save seed from the Jet Star. You can, but you don't know what kind of tomato you're going to get. It's a hybrid. And now these will go into the freezer just like this. Now that my bread and butter pickles have come up to a full boil, you need to start putting them into jars. You're going to leave 1/2 inch headspace. Again, I eyeball this. My canner only holds 8 pints, so I'm only going to do 8 pints at a time because I don't want the liquid to cool off before it goes into the water bath. You're going to wipe the rims off with a paper towel dampened with vinegar and put them into a simmering canner. So the liquid is hot, the canner is hot, you're good to go. You need to make sure that your water is covering the jars 1 inch. Now all my jars are in the canner. I'm going to bring it up to a full rolling boil and keep it there for 10 minutes. Then I'm going to turn the heat off and let the jars set for 5 before removing them. My pickles that did not go in the canner yet are on simmering right now, on a very low simmering. You don't want to overcook them, but I also don't want them to get cold. I try to do something every day to preserve food to get us through the winter into the next harvest. Just a little bit every day. And then we try to work on the remodel at least twice a week. I ended up with all of these bread and butter pickles. I think there are 19 jars. My green beans have slowed down quite a bit, and this was my harvest for today. These will go into the freezer. They freeze fine. I don't blanch them. I just stick them in a bag after I've popped and pulled the strings. They don't clump together, nothing. I don't dry them, I just put them in a bag, put them in the freezer. I ended up with a jar of sage that is now dried and ready to be put up. For sausage, I use it in my sausage mix. I also use it at Thanksgiving time when we have turkey. And I ended up with 4-gallon bags full of tomatoes. I want to thank you for coming along with me today in the kitchen. And if this is the kind of content that you enjoy, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye.